Hαίrete friends, welcome to Classics in Color, your weekly dive into some of the ancient world's wackiest facts. I'm Mark Graves, and today we're going to be talking about what the ancient Romans and Greeks thought about gender norms and relations between genders in cultures outside of their own. Also, apologies if the mic is picking up any rain noises. We are definitely getting our share of those April showers today. On this channel, I often talk about sex and gender and everything that could possibly relate to those topics. And what I would like to do for this video to put a bit of a spin on that is, as I said, to look at some other cultures besides Greece and Rome, especially the cultures that the Romans and the Greeks found interesting, weird, exotic, maybe even disgusting, just anything unusual and noteworthy. Unfortunately, in order to do this, I'm going to have to use Greek and Roman sources, so we're not going to be hearing directly from these other cultures what did they think about sex. We're going to be hearing indirectly through the Romans what they thought about this other culture's way of having sex. And I'm doing that for two reasons. First off, because some of these cultures we just don't have sources, or we have very few sources, so it's not even possible for us to go look at what did they think about this topic. And then the other reason is that even for cultures like the Egyptians, where we do have sources and things, I am not an Egyptian scholar. I'm a classicist, so I'm going to stick to what I know, looking at it from the Greek and Roman perspective. But if I miss anything interesting, please forgive my ignorance, but then inform us in the comments below. The first culture that we're going to look at is actually the Qiprions. They live on the Isle of Cyprus, and they're actually Greek. So the island of Cyprus was mostly colonized by the Greeks in roughly the Bronze Age, but there are many different types of Greeks, and all Greeks didn't have a problem as seeing other Greeks as weird and different, and the Qiprions are no exception. And moreover, the author of the particular passage that we're going to be looking at is Justin, and he's a Roman, so he's even further removed from the Qiprions. And the context of this quote is that Dido, or Alyssa, who is the mythical founder of the city of Carthage, is sailing around the Mediterranean looking for a place to found her city when she encounters the Qiprions and their strange marriage customs. It was a custom among the Qiprions to send their daughters on stated days before their marriage to the seashore to prostitute themselves, and thus procure money for their marriage portions, and to pay at the same time offerings to Venus for the preservation of their chastity in time to come. Of these, Alyssa ordered about 80 to be seized and taken on board, that her men might have wives and her city a population. So we have a lovely, strange quote there that has to do with ritual prostitution as sort of a preparation for marriage. A little odd, right? And from what I understand, scholars debate whether this was actually a thing or just sort of a tall tale that people told. From what I understand, it's most likely a tall tale, but it's still an interesting story nonetheless. For the rest of this video, we're going to be looking at quotes from Herodotus, that lover of tall tales, and the first one has to do with the Egyptians and what he sees as their strange gender roles. The women go to market, and the men stay home and weave. Women even urinate standing up, and men sitting down. I have been informed by some male humans of my acquaintance that sitting while urinating can actually be much more comfortable. So I do not blame these Egyptian gentlemen. Our next quote is still from Herodotus and is about the Gendanes, which are a people who live roughly in the area of Libya or North Africa. And they, according to Herodotus, don't really practice marriage. They have a much more open approach to relationships. Next to these Makai are the Gendanes, where every woman wears many leather anklets because, so it is said, she puts on an anklet for every man with whom she has had intercourse, and she who wears the most is reputed to be the best because she has been loved by the most men. Some other Libyan cultures are the Machiles and the Alsaeans, and again, according to Herodotus, they do not have their young women engage in sex work. Instead, what they have them do is basically fight to the death to prove who is the best mate. The Machiles wear their hair long behind and the Alsaeans in front. They celebrate a yearly festival of Athena, where their maidens are separated into 2 bands and fight each other with stones and sticks. Thus, they say, honoring in the way of their ancestors that native goddess whom we call Athena. Maidens who die of their wounds are called false virgins. Before the girls are set fighting, the whole people will choose the fairest maid and arm her with a Corinthian helmet and a Greek panoply to be then mounted on a chariot and drawn all along the lakeshore. The intercourse of men and women there is promiscuous. They do not cohabit, but have intercourse like cattle. Next up, we have the Scythians and the Amazons, and the passage in Herodotus on this is so fascinating, but it's also really long, so please go look up the whole thing, read the whole thing. I'm going to do my best here to summarize and then read the best bits, but read the whole thing. So the Scythians and the Amazons haven't really interacted before, but the Amazons are sort of lost and they bump into them and they have a fight. But the Scythians don't even realize actually that they're fighting women because they're wearing all this armor. And it's only after the first fight when they go out to collect corpses that they notice, oh shit, these are ladies. And so what they decide to do is we don't want to fight them anymore. We're going to try to seduce them. So they gather up all their young, attractive men and they send them off and they tell them, okay, follow the Amazons, but give them space. Don't act threatening. Don't attack them. If they run at you, back off. But if they move away, follow them and then just copy whatever they're doing. So just copy everything that they do and stay close to them. And they do this for several days. They just follow the Amazons around and they're very non-threatening. And after a while, the Amazons sort of notice that they're not threatening. They're not trying to attack them in any way. And they start to get a little more comfortable with having these men around. At midday, the Amazons would scatter and go apart from each other singly or in pairs, roaming apart for greater comfort. The Scythians noticed this and did likewise. And as the women wandered alone, a young man laid hold of one of them, and the woman did not resist, but let him do his will. And since they did not understand each other's speech, and she could not speak to him, she signed with her hands that he should come the next day to the same place and bring another youth with him, showing by signs that there should be 2. And she would bring another woman with her. The youth went away and told his comrades, and the next day he came himself with another to the place, where he found the Amazon and another with her awaiting them. When the rest of the young men learned of this, they had intercourse with the rest of the Amazons. Presently, they joined their camps and lived together. So that story could be kind of creepy, but personally, I just found it weird but really funny. I was chuckling the whole time. It's a strange, interesting story. And I also like how Herodotus describes this language barrier, that they have no idea what the other person is talking about. Because often in stories in the ancient world, people will just start talking to each other, even though they're from totally different places, and they just start talking as if they have no problem, no issues whatsoever. Like Odysseus will just show up in a totally new place and he can communicate instantly. Nobody even comments like, oh, you have kind of a funny accent. I couldn't quite understand that last word. Can you repeat that? Like, that never happens. They just communicate perfectly. And so I like that this story mentions that acknowledges that that could be a problem. Although I do find their sign language ability a little improbable. Like, how would you go about signing like 2 of you here tomorrow? I don't know, maybe it's not that hard, but apparently they worked it out somehow in more ways than one, because the Scythians not only have sex with the Amazons, but they fall in love with them, and they kind of en masse propose to the Amazons like, hey, we want to marry you and live with you permanently. And the Amazons en masse responses, yeah, that sounds cool, but your mama's gonna hate us. You cannot take us home. We cannot live in your city and follow your rules and gender norms for women, right? We're the Amazons. We like toughing it out and hunting and doing all that man stuff. And so if you want to marry us, okay, but we're not going to live in your city. We have to go found like a new city for just us so we can keep our ways. And they do that actually. And according to Herodotus, the descendants of that mixed culture are still around when he's writing. Ever since then, the women of the Sauromatai have followed their ancient ways. They ride out hunting with their men or without them. They go to war and dress the same as the men. The language of the Saromatai is Scythian, but not spoken in its ancient purity since the Amazons never learned it correctly. In regard to marriage, it is the custom that no maiden weds until she has killed a man of the enemy, and some of them grow old and die unmarried because they cannot fulfill the law. Of all the marriage ceremonies I have talked about on this channel, this one has got to be the darndest. This is the most extreme one, that you have to murder a dude before you can get married. I propose that we incorporate that into modern wedding ceremonies. Last but not least, we have another quote from Herodotus, this time about the Babylonians. The foulest Babylonian custom is that which compels every woman of the land to sit in the temple of Aphrodite and have intercourse with some stranger once in her life. Many women who are rich and proud and disdain to mingle with the rest drive to the temple in covered carriages drawn by teams and stand there with a great retinue of attendants. But most sit down in the sacred plot of Aphrodite with crowns or cords on their heads. Passages marked by line run every way through the crowd, by which the men pass and make their choice. Once a woman has taken her place there, she does not go away to her home before some stranger has cast money into her lap and had intercourse with her outside the temple. It does not matter what sum the money is, the woman will never refuse, for that would be a sin, the money being by this act made sacred. So she follows the first man who casts it and rejects no one. After the intercourse, having discharged her sacred duty to the goddess, she goes away to her home, and thereafter there is no bribe, however great, that will get her. So then, the women that are fair and tall are soon free to depart. But the uncomely have long to wait because they cannot fulfill the law, for some of them remain for 3 years or 4. So I sincerely hope that this one is completely made up, because this is awful. Having to have sex with just some random stranger in public, like in front of everyone, whew, that is bad. But even worse than that is that you could end up just sitting there for 4 years because nobody wants to have sex with you for basically free. Like, somehow that is even worse. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for checking out this video. Special thank you, as always, to subscribers and to Patreon members, and I hope to see all of you again next week. Χαίρετε.